that. Welcome back, carers, agers, thrivers, seniors, the whole family, everybody. It's Dr. Lana here, Care and Thrive with Dr. Lana. And as you know, I've been bringing in guests from all over the place, and we are going to. I'm so excited to introduce my guest, special guest for today, and to share her story. And you'll see where you find yourself in this story. And as we go along, feel free to see how you can take the cape off, which is what this channel is about. To remember to take the super cape off, place your oxygen mask on first, build up and bring out the extra oxygen tank, and bring a friend with you, and share, like, comment, subscribe, and let's have a community of generations and caring and sharing, which is one of my sister's favorite saying, caring and sharing. So without further ado, I'm introducing my friend Lisa. I'll let her tell you her last name, and because it's a doozy. And Lisa, when I met on a fantastic international platform, and just amazing people all over the world, but what we share in common is our love for animals. And well, I suppose anybody in need, right? Like anybody who needs need, right? So she is here to tell a unique story, and to hear it will touch your heart. And when you see yourself in that story, know that you are not alone. You can take time out for yourself, and time out for yourself is so important. And Lisa has some wonderful ways that we can all benefit from and share and interact with the family, yes, but make sure that when you have all your seemingly overwhelming tasks to do in your sphere, or as you're aging and you feel overwhelmed as well, or you're trying to figure out how to get the children and grand together, and how do we do this community thing, all of that. So take it away, Lisa. Welcome, and tell us your story.
I love it. Thank you, Lana, for having me. I'm super honored to be here. And I just love what you're doing, and I love your heart in all of this. So I'm super honored to be here. So first off, my name is Lisa, and my last name is Ciesniewski, as we say it here in the US. My horse trainer, when I was growing up riding, when I would walk into the show ring, she would always tell the announcer, you say his new ski with a C in front of it. So Ciesniewski is how she would pronounce it. Apparently, if you're in Poland, it's Ciesniewski, and it means the pusher, the driver, or the motivating force. So that is, wow. I found that out actually one of the very first times I was out on a date with my significant other, and there was a bunch of rugby guys. There are all these Polish guys, and I was like, "Here's my name," and they started chanting Ciesniewski, and it turns out it means the pusher, driver, motivating force. So just so happens a few days later, when I was being a little bit of a, really sweetheart at the moment, my significant other goes, "You go, Ciesniewski," and I went, "Oh, that didn't go so well." So it's a funny name. It's got a lot of meaning behind it, and yeah. So my story as far as caregiving goes is I'm very passionate about caregiving, and I'm very passionate about it for many reasons. I would say my journey as a caregiver started when I was 6, and I started riding horses. I've always loved animals, but horses really just did an amazing thing for me. And I feel like their presence in my life was just the starter. It gives me that I had the empathy, it's the care, it's part of what you have to do. There's a routine to it. They can't take care of themselves. It's and horses have to be very meticulous about caring for a horse. They can easily become dehydrated, they can easily become ill, and you really have to make sure that they're eating and they're doing all of the things that they need to be doing. So as a caregiver, I feel like that necessity is there. And so I learned that necessity of being able to care for another being at a very young age. So that then kind of coupled with my my mom My mom was a phenomenal lady. She was like this angel on this earth, and she was one of those people, probably where I got the caregiving thing from. But she was just one of those people that would show up at everybody's everything.
Oh,
And she did their, their recitals or their jogs or their weddings, or like, she's just an amazing person. And she was a trauma counselor. So I also had a short-term caregiving situation with her when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in '09. And she was given about 2 weeks to live. I was actually the person that had to tell her that, in fact, we were in the ER, and I had talked to the doctor, and they were like, she's got probably 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay. So caregiving journey on that short term, really one of those when it's like, you're not really expecting this, and now all of a sudden you've got a job to do. So that really hit then. And I would say that my time with the horses really helped through that process, right? It helped me deal with whatever medications had to be done. It helped me deal with, dealing with her being bedridden and having to take care of all of that pieces of it. So it really was like, you come to the house. My mom, like I said, she was like the angel. So the amount of people that showed up to talk to my mother was insane. So we were also hosts, but my sister and I, we had the one nurse would come in, the hospice nurse would come in, but my sister and I basically dropped everything and spent what we thought was going to be 2 weeks, turned out to be 2 months, caring for my mom. So it was a beautiful, just beautiful, amazing experience. So anybody that is in that type of caregiving situation where it's a shorter term, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. I just can tell you that the more that you focus on just really showing up, loving that person, knowing that it's a shorter time, and just taking that space was huge. I will also tell you that her passing was extremely peaceful. So it gave me a completely different look on that. So that's also another piece of the puzzle that I find was like just so it was life changing, right? I would say I almost had a fear of death prior to that. But my experience, yeah, oh yeah. So it was very different. So now today I'm like, oh, that was so beautiful and so peaceful. There's just this moment of like, he's just unbelievable. And so I would say that like really shifted everything. So, I know if you're in a short-term situation like that, it's a caregiving, it's like, just know that, there is good things still possible. There are beautiful moments still possible, and you just got to look for them. So, and then as far as caregiving goes beyond that, my significant other of, I believe, I don't know, we're like 17 or 18 years. I got to look it up this year. And he's bipolar. So,
okay. So that's another. So we go from, well, the horses and you're growing up and you're getting that foundation. Then mom, which is obviously a whole new situation in itself, but you get to see different things and learn different things. But using all that coming along, and now you have another relationship that's collaborative and loving in its own way, but also carries caregiving. So you're like I don't know, three times a super lady. Wow, it's an incredible story. Keep going.
it's
Loving this.
it's interesting because it's partly I feel like it's partly my calling, right? It's part of a that servant leadership idea. The idea of like showing up as that just to serve is really, and I probably got it from my mom. Like I said, she showed up at everybody's everything. Like when I was in high school, people would call our house and be like, "Can I talk to your mom?" They were like friends of mine, and they were going through something, and they were like, "Can I talk to your mom?" Okay, like just really just an amazing. So which is probably also how I kind of ended up in the relationship that is also a caregiving relationship, right? It also has that aspects to it.
Yeah,
And
I can see that.
yeah, so it's and that's been a journey, right? So that's a
Mhm.
long term, like that's why I say there's a difference between like the short term caregiving
Oh
and
yeah.
then we have a real long term, right? That you're like, okay, this is the long haul. Mental illness is that's a tough one sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And it is a, and it is a, it, it's becoming more of a topic now as, it's like the, one of the greatest topics, but it's fantastic because it's something that was always like kept hidden in the closet. You could never tell anybody, oh, I have, um, I, attention deficit disorder, like we've spoken in a speaker with a speaker before, or my mom has cancer. You never use the C word for sure. It's just like she's not feeling well. And definitely, mental illness, I am depressed, I feel suicide, all the things that go through with persons is coming to the fore. And it's good because caregivers would always, and persons themselves would feel so impeded by just going out, was like, I can't let people see me. I mean, they might find me out, but also for the emotions that you would have gone through. Even though it's your calling, you said, I'm sure you had, can you talk a little bit about how maybe you have felt, or did you sometimes, like caregivers do, go on autopilot and forget things?
so especially with the longer term,
Yeah.
so with the bipolar side of things, it was a real journey. Didn't know what was going on in the beginning of the situation, right? So there were times we had quite a lot of chaos in life. It was very unpredictable in behavior. And so it would be, and through the hard times of that, like through the chaotic times before we got help and before we started to learn about the brain and all of the things that you can do, um, actually manage and deal with and live with bipolar. Prior to that, it was pretty chaotic. And in the most stressful times of that, I had multiple people be like, why do you stay with him? Why do you deal with that? And my answer was always, that's not him. I know the person that I'm with. I know that
Got
person.
you. Yes.
What's going on here? I don't know what this is, but this is not normal. There's something off.
Right.
And so it took a while. At first, I thought he was just creative, artistic. We thought he had, I took a lot of things at face value. And so I didn't know, I just kind of, because of the horses also, I think it is, I can communicate a lot more, telepathically almost. And so, um, with him, like I could deal with him. And then there were these chaotic things going on. And like, it was hard to really understand what was happening, until it got really to where like he was really manic. And I was like, okay, now I understand. I went and researched. There was a point in time where he was like, just, you couldn't even deal with him because he would be up for
Wow.
long periods of time, like 3 days at a time.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I went researching, did all this stuff and found out, like, I was like, okay, he's bipolar. So I showed this stuff and he's like, that's me, like in total mania. I was in a hotel, like it was just, and he's like, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I was like, yes. And so that started the journey of like, okay, how do you even deal with that? How do you even, like, if you get somebody in the family gets a diagnosis of something, right? Like how do you then start to wrap your mind around what that is?
Yeah.
And how do you even start to begin to like, what direction am I going? So, honestly, it was a lot of stumbling in the beginning. We had a psychiatrist that I would go to every appointment with him.
Well, that was my question. How did you go to therapy? Because some caregivers don't actually. I mean, again, the stigma or feeling as though, well, I just have to bear it out. So kudos to you, and a reminder for the audience that, again, therapy is just like if you have to go to the dentist, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have to go to the doctor, if you have to take medication for a headache, nobody blame. I think everyone in any high intense thing should have, even if it's for a short time, someone who's there to listen. So it's a plus. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So at one point in time, I actually went to we were in San Luis Obispo, and I went into a center. So I gotta remember, my mom was a trauma counselor.
No, great.
So my mom, and she had grown up in an alcoholic home. So I actually started going to like Alateen when I was like 11 years old. So I knew to reach out to these different, to like support, right? Like, and that is one thing I would definitely say. Anytime somebody's in crisis, for sure there are, you know, whether you got to call the 1-800 number and talk to somebody, whatever it is, there's so many resources available, especially today online, like to be able to connect, reach out. People can help in so many ways. And yeah, we ended up with a psychiatrist, like he ended up on a 5150, so 72-hour hold. Oh yeah, we had it was, and so working through those pieces of it was, you know, it was stressful. It was hard. And it was just about like, okay, how do we figure out what's going on? So he got on lithium, and we actually saw a psychiatrist for, I don't know, probably a year and a half. I would go to every appointment with him. And nobody ever talked to us about actually what was going on. They just gave him meds and asked how it was going, and that was it. And like, there wasn't really much going on. I didn't even know there's more aspects to his illness, right? There's psychotic features, there's a whole bunch of pieces to the puzzle. And so it wasn't until his second major episode that he ended up actually going to a place in Santa Barbara that specializes in mental illness. And in that process, it was a 90-day program. And that was where we learned all the tools. And so I would say that just that alone was transformative for him. And around that time was actually the same time I read my favorite book, which I have a copy of it here. The Motivation Manifesto.
Oh, well, yes, I've read. I haven't gone to read that yet, but yes, definitely I've read. Yeah.
So at that time, I also went through this process. Like I had there we go, camera. So I read this, and that book changed my life. And so it was at the same time period that all of that was going on. And so since then, it has been a lot of growth. We've got a lot of resources. We talk a lot about how it goes. And there are still times that I have to step in and really be like, these are the boundaries. This is the caregiving like situation that we're in right at the moment, right? Because we're still partners, and it's a caregiving. So, you know, when you're having that relationship with somebody, like whether it's somebody that maybe had cared for you and now you're caring for them. Right. So the relationship might shift a little bit over time. It might, it has those different dynamics to it. And so just being aware that that's even possible, you know, to have the perspective that like, it's also a huge blessing. I mean, what learned from the journey, what I've learned about myself, what I've learned about others, what I've learned about loving somebody. And, you know, because when you would have the people be like, well, why do you stay with him? Well, that loyalty has taught me so much. So when you're in the heartache of like, this is hard. And, you know, I have a very strong belief in God. So I have a very strong relationship there. And you're like, okay, this is really hard. I know you told me to do these things. Like, what do I do? Right. So it's just stepping through that and acknowledging that piece. And so, yeah. So if you have any more questions on that, let me know.
So grace in the process. The loyalty is undeniable. I mean, and animals you obviously naturally have that, but when you have animals around you, and I've grown up also with animals all around me, and they just like, they stay no matter what. You see how they like stick to whoever their friend is, and it doesn't have to be the same species, but they stick to their friends. And you learn that, and then they stick to you, and they're always wanting you, and they miss you, especially like horses and dogs and so on. Cats, I don't know. I think for us, cats are staff, but I mean, to a certain extent, you learn the loyalty and the devotion, and that is incredible. And then for mom, you saw her loyalty, so that kind of came down for you generationally, and then you find yourself in this process. So it's a real example. Thank you so much for sharing, for openly sharing that. And I know that our listeners are going to be like, "Ooh, that's me." Or feeling so frustrated, I can't do it anymore. And of course, when the voices outside your head seem to be like, "Why are you?" I mean, people say some really mindless, let's just say. It might not be out of spite or anything. They're just not understanding, and they bring a level of they could bring a level of doubt. So it's remarkable that you're saying that. So for our listeners, I would say wonderful, like, grace in the journey. That's just what I got from you, and learning about yourself in the process. So it's not so that it's not a burden, so that you actually see that the process can be gone through, because many caregivers are taking care of spouses, as you said. What you expected to be a like even Stevens is kind of like wonky, but that's how relationships go, even friendships. So that's fantastic. That's my only question, really. So how do you get through like a day? What kind of things do you do that help you get through, that could possibly help like those in the caregiving process, and even a senior, to maybe see where they can find, and family, how they can, but personally first, what do you do?
So personally, I have a lot of habits. I am very intentional about what I do and how I spend my time. I'm very clear on what is the important pieces. What are like during the day for that period of day. Just really understanding like what are the main things that actually have to get done today, and really looking at like, okay, so, and I look at those. I have a habit of doing a morning routine where I really spend my own time. When I first get up in the morning, I read 20 minutes, a book, no matter what. And so that is just so that I can get my brain in the right mode. Because if I wake up, I'm not necessarily in the caregiving mode, not necessarily in the motivated mode, not necessarily, on my own, it's not always the best. So I read for about 20 minutes. I organize my day, make sure I know what my needle movers are. What are the major things that have to happen? What has to take place? Like yesterday, we had to make sure we got lithium in and make sure that the medications are there. So that was like a priority of the day. And sometimes those things are going to take longer than you want. So it's really being able to be very clear on like what actually has to happen today, and being able to get action moving on that as quickly as possible, right? So that I'm not like at the end of the day being like, oh no, those things didn't happen, and now we're going to be in trouble, right? So it's really being aware of that in a schedule. I then actually journal, and that would be one of the things I would highly recommend anybody, that if you're in any overwhelm, or you're caregiving for a period of time, and maybe you're having a little bit of some feelings that are coming up that are not, you're starting to get like a little bit like, this person is starting to bug me and I love them and this is hard. If you're having anything like that, journaling really helps get clarity. And there's a lot of scientific backing on
Yes.
how much journaling helps with clarity. It helps with happiness. It helps with actually being able to be empathetic and patient with that person that you're caregiving for, even in the moments where they're struggling, because that's the thing. A caregiving situation is, you're not dealing with somebody who's fully healthy, that is able to function, right? So there's a lot of pieces to that require a little extra help there. And so it's being able to, for myself, being able to be really take care of me, so that my cup is overflowing, so that I then have the empathy and the ability and the patience. So it becomes crucial to have like that 20 minutes of reading in the morning, my 5-10 minutes of organizing the day, my time to really journal about what is happening. And so that's really my morning routine. And then based off of what goes on in that day, whatever that priority is, then we take action on those things. The other thing that I would suggest, like on a daily, that is super important, especially with family, is communication.
Oh,
and being very clear about what those things are that have to happen, so that everybody's on page. And maybe if it's somebody, like for example, for my other half, it's sometimes he has a hard time with remembering that something might be happening, or like remembering that like when this is happening, like these other things must be happening. So it's sometimes being very clear and patient, like that reminder, and how I communicate that. Am I perfect at that? No, definitely not.
none of us are, but it sure sounds like a plan. And at least, sometimes caregiving can feel as though you're all over the place, because demands just come one after the other, and there's no time to figure it out. So as you say, you have intention, you have your habits, you have a schedule, you have your journals, and then it's not like you leave yourself to be like the only person. You bring in, and that brings dignity, that brings collaboration, it brings togetherness, and it fosters the community spirit, and I don't want to say well, togetherness. I mean togetherness, not in a superficial way, but people, once you feel dignified and validated, your feelings are validated, I think, then we all like meet on that level. And we the person who's being taken care of doesn't feel like, okay, I'm a burden, I'm less than you. And then you don't feel like, oh, I have to be superwoman and be greatest. It's a collaborative thing.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yes. And speaking to that, and then I want to say one other thing before we wrap up real fast, but the ability to, I've been reading a really cool book called Uncommon Accountability. And it really talks about how accountability is more of giving somebody agency. So they talk about it in the sense of like, you're leading a team. And they talk about it like, if you're leading a team, there's these repercussions that happen if this action doesn't happen. So they're leading by consequences. And the idea of this book is to talk about leading by holding somebody capable. And so it's
capable, you said?
Capable, yeah. So it's a very small shift, yet it's profound, because when you're dealing with somebody, especially somebody that has like a mental illness or a wellness situation, right? Like when we're having that, we're helping them have agency, helping them. That's where like you're rising the bar, right? Rather than it's just, I'm just taking care of you. It's just this, like, it's really helping and looking at like, how do I put things in place that help them thrive, right? Because this is the person I'm helping care for. Like, what are the motivators? How do I hold them capable? How do I encourage them to take that agency for themselves? Instead, a lot of times, a lot of people will almost like give up, right? Yes. Like in that caregiver type of situation. So they'll like give up, and they're depressed. It depends on what the diagnosis or whatever is going on. Even if they're just old, like there's a lot of things that they start to lose their own personhood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's really being aware that that's happening, and having empathy, and being able to really just empower them in your actions, in how you ask them to do things, in how,
Inclusivity, yes.
yes, and how you include them, yes, in the whole situation. So I find that that's critical. And then the one other thing I would say when we're talking about like my habits is I do what are called pit stops. And this is a massively critical piece that keeps my sanity. And I realize a couple different practices in it. One is I take a 10-minute pause every day. So I lay down, it's 10 minutes. You have to be able to find 10 minutes in your day.
Yes.
You have to. I don't care who you are, you gotta be able to find 10.
If you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life, as Tony Robbins would say. You know, you
Not
gotta
just
find
that,
10 minutes.
not just that, but you're not going to be able to function well enough to care for anybody else.
No.
So it's vital that you're like able to fit this in, right? Because once again, it has to be your cup is overflowing, not your cup is half empty. Otherwise, we need to find somebody with the overflowing cup to help support you until you're got it. Because it's when you're running on empty, when it's in chaos, when it's quick, like there's a lot of things that happen, and sometimes you need that support. So when the cup is overflowing, and in order to make that happen so that we're not struggling, the pit stop. So I do the 10-minute pause. For 10
I'm writing
minutes.
this down too. So I think most people are writing this down. So 10-minute pause, pit
10-minute
stop.
pause. It's a game changer. You lay down, you close your eyes for 10 minutes. I don't care what you think about. You don't have to meditate. You know, it doesn't matter. Think, don't think. Fall asleep. Doesn't matter. I do have to set an alarm because a lot of times I can fall asleep in 10 minutes. And sometimes they're 20 minutes, and sometimes it's a 40-minute nap, right? It's really important also that you're getting sleep. That is one of the let's talk about that real fast, because that's like a critical one that somehow I leave out sometimes. 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night.
Same.
It's critical.
I know, like a newborn baby or more. It was amazing how people think that we can go from that to 4, 3, or 2 hours of sleep. It's actually impossible.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So how do you get 7 to 9 hours sleep?
So when I don't let myself get out of bed before that 7 hours. So when I get in bed, I don't let myself get up till that 7 hours has happened. Now, in some caregiving situations, not so simple. So you're gonna have to work around that, right? So just because your situation might be different than mine doesn't mean you can't get 7 hours of sleep. So it's, you know, being preemptive, right? It's really thinking out, like, I make sure I get to bed by a certain time. And because if I want to get up that early, then I need to be in bed by this time. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. And if I'm feeling tired, and if my pause turns into a nap, that is okay. That is good. That is healthy, because I'm taking, right? There's no guilt. I'm taking that moment, and that moment is what allows me to have the energy to care for that person, right? And to show up. And really, one other thing with the pit stops, I do a 20-minute walk. And
doing exercise.
And even
stress
if
that enough.
And even if you stay in the house, you can walk in place.
Yes,
it is a thing. So there's different ways to make this happen, but the walking, getting outside for me is crucial. And once again, I'm still caregiving for my horses, so I've got those guys every day, and they just put a smile on my face. They're amazing. And so and then the other thing with the pit stops is when you're going from one activity to the next, really taking that moment between to stop and say, okay, I'm going to release all of this stress from the last couple minutes, or from whatever I was doing. Whatever I did, that is done. I'm done. I let it go. To like center, breathe, calm thyself, and then set intention for whatever you're doing. Set intention for when you walk in that room to be able to help somebody. Set intention when you come to work and you got to shift gears, like stop before you walk in the house, take a deep breath, let that go. Okay, set intention. Because a lot of people are exhausted because they literally are going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so they're never stopping. And you have to just take those breaks, those little, and so it's not going to take you any extra time really in your day, just a few seconds. And those few seconds change the game because they allow you to tension. And then your subconscious mind is going to be able to react to what's going on. So you're not just reacting out of, just all over people.
Exactly.
You're actually able to like, okay, this is my intention. My subconscious mind is now then going to be in alignment with what my intention is. And so your actions are even easier to do whatever it is you want to do because you took those couple seconds. So I would say that those are like my critical pieces.
Wow.
And in the last moments, if it's not going well, and I'm really struggling, the one thing I do remember is this too shall pass,
Well,
because it's gonna.
it's gonna. Well, that is a fantastic place to end. And what can you say? We've learned so much. Thank you so much, Lisa. You're all heart, loyalty, everything. Intention, pit stops, rest, pause, and release. Just remember that, caregivers, seniors, relatives, families, and we can all make a difference. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been
Thank you.
fantastic. Yes.